So, over the course of the 10 plus years that I've been talking about Bleach on YouTube now, we've discussed all manner of characters. From expert swordsmen and shadowy ninja masters to skilled spellcasters and yes, even gods themselves. But despite it all, one character has always stood head and shoulders above the rest. One character has amassed such a sweeping, decisive, uncontested string of victories under their belt from start to finish that their presence can no longer be ignored. Sado Chad Yasutora is the definitive winner of the Bleach story. From his unending love affair with the ground, perhaps the series' longest, most stable relationship, to wailing on regular, unwitting humans for substantial cash prizes at boxing tournaments, Chad has seen and done it all. And there can be no denying that he's come away from the narrative, when all is said and done, the best of all the main characters. And so in today's video, we're going to take the time to meticulously pore over Chad's many victories throughout Bleach. It is, after all, or so I've been led to believe, completely impossible for Chad to lose a fight. It cannot be imagined. That's the prevailing quote attributed to his character, so it must be true. If Ichigo says it, how can it be wrong? And I think you'll see throughout the course of this video that that is exactly how the narrative of Bleach plays out. Before we get started on the video, guys, there won't be any spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc in the video to come, as Chad doesn't really do anything in the final arc whatsoever. So, I mean, I guess he fights some statues at one point. I'm serious, literal statues, like made of stone. Quincy stone maybe, but stone nonetheless. At least the anime had him successfully punch some air at one point, but I mean, it's hardly an improvement. Like, seriously, why couldn't Chad just fight Meninas? It's not like she has anything else to do. So, the first of Chad's many epic victories comes very early into the story, as you'd expect from a fighter as prolific as this. During the Agent of the Shinigami arc, Chad gets to unleash his latent power for the very first time against notorious Hollow Bulbous G, often considered one of the most dangerous Hollows in the Bleach universe. With Ichigo's little sister Karin in mortal danger, Chad steps up. Although he initially can't see the Hollow clearly, the truth is that he's just choosing to fight with his eyes closed in order to try and give the Hollow a fighting chance. With his eyes shut, Karin helps to guide his steps, allowing him to swiftly dodge and even counterattack. Eventually, after recalling the words of his abuelo and frankly just deciding to open his eyes for once, Chad musters his strange ability and his power manifests into a transformed right arm, which allows him to deal a colossal blow to Bulbous G, one of Kubo's most terrifying creations. Chad's new arm and the fact that he is now fighting with his eyes open signals the start of what will be an unstoppable barrage of victories to come. After receiving his newfound armor, Chad decides to take pity on Bulbous G, perhaps Bleach's deadliest villain, and finishes off the monster with a single punch to the face, realizing that after everything it can barely stand to be in his presence. Now that he has access to his true strength, that he has decided to continue fighting with his eyes open so as not to insult his enemies, Chad ventures into the Soul Society next in order to help Ichigo rescue Rukia. And it's here that we find Chad's next victory, another win for us to both celebrate and study. As Chad relentlessly barrels through the 8th Division, heroically taking no prisoners, as he cracks skulls and mows down battalions, legions of Shinigami just trying to do their job, it's here that Ichigo utters his most famous quote. The quote that would come to define not only Chad's entire narrative moving forward, but really the narrative of Bleach itself. Our main character's most prescient statement. One that would ring true throughout the rest of the series. I can't even imagine Chad losing. Let's take a moment to break down and analyze that line, shall we? As there is so much depth packed in here. First of all, Kubo's foreshadowing is truly peak here. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. He's saying that Ichigo can't imagine. That is to say, he cannot imagine Chad losing, which as you'll see is absolutely the case, foreshadowing the fact that Chad cannot lose a battle. It's genius level stuff, and as you'll see towards the end of the series, it comes back to bite Ichigo in a way he wasn't anticipating. Secondly, and you'll only realise this if you truly get into the weeds on this one, when Ichigo says, "I can't even imagine," he's referring to the fact that he doesn't have Gremmy's ability of the Visionary, which, and I can confirm, is a Kubo 6th level secret. And then finally, the last two words of that line are as follows: Chad losing. It sounds so definitive, but of course we know it isn't possible nor true. Anyway, after making orphans of many children of Squad 8, Chad is stopped in his path by the division's third seat, the immensely powerful Tatsufasa Enjoji, who, if you'll remember, we recently ranked as one of the series' strongest characters. If you haven't seen that ranking, I suggest you go and check it out. But of course, Tatsufasa, despite his impressive display, is no match for Chad's unstoppable fist, and in his quest for greater violence, Chad swiftly defeats the third seat in a single hit. You'll notice that both here and against Bulbous G, one of the most feared hollow of all time, the same hollow responsible for the death of Ichigo's mother, Chad defeated both of his opponents in a single hit once his powers were awakened. Absolutely no one can stand on this kind of level, which is why, as you know, we can't imagine him losing. So that's 2 decisive victories now under Chad's belt, and yes, there will be many more to come, but sadly, he doesn't receive another fight in the Soul Society arc. Likely because Kubo realised that Ichigo is supposed to be the main character, and so he had to pump the brakes on Chad's ascension into that role. After all, if Chad is busy soloing all of these characters, then who will be left for Ichigo to fight? Ichigo's already struggling with the likes of Ikaku and Renji. Tatsufasa would have downed him in an instant. So, with the Soul Society arc complete, let's move on to the Urankar arc, where things go from good to great for Chad. The Urankar arc opens immediately after the Soul Society arc with our heroes invading Hueco Mundo. Kubo dives straight into the action this time, and I think that's smart. And immediately Chad takes decisive action, after having been denied this in the Soul Society arc in an effort to snatch the mantle of main character for himself. Chad heroically delivers a fatal blow to the back of Ichigo's head, hoping to kill his friend in one hit, like he did with both Bulbous G, the series' most dangerous hollow, the one who defeated Byakuya at the end of the Soul Society arc, and Tatsufasa before him. Ichigo is a little too tough for that, however, but at the very least he is incapacitated for the remainder of this upcoming fight. Chad versus Demora Zod, the Urankar's most terrifying defender. The way this character uses his gigantic fists to battle is incredible foreshadowing of how Chad will proceed to do the same thing later on. Chad then dominates Demora in a display so demoralizing that it probably should be illegal, but Chad's a hero, and only does what he deems to be heroically necessary. In the latest in his long line of victories, Chad sucker punches Demora in the side of the head, likely causing lasting brain damage before grabbing the Urankar and throwing him across the room. At the end of the battle, Chad acknowledges that Demora has lost the will to fight after having exhausted all of his options, but rather than show his Urankar foe mercy, Chad decides to send a message to all of Hueco Mundo while there's nothing Ichigo can do about it. The Espada, aizen, all of them, by heroically finishing off his surrendering foe, revealing a brand new ability at the same time: El Directo. After crushing Demora's ribcage with an earth-shattering punch, Chad sets his sights on his next target, Gantenbane Mosqueda, one of Aizen's Privarone Espada. Although disgusted by the fact that he isn't facing a true Espada, Chad decides to grant him the honour of a battle all the same. But things are a little different this time. Rather than wipe his enemy out in a single hit, as has been the case with every fight so far, Chad toys with Gantenbane, allowing his opponent the opportunity to test his strength. As Gantenbane starts tallying up his many defeats, counting them out loud in an effort to motivate himself, eventually reaching 100 losses total against Chad, he decides to kick things up a notch, the sheer force required to respawn after every death beginning to wear him down. Gantenbane, at last realizing that he is at his most powerful when in Waco Mundo thanks to the Hollow Reiatsu around, even unlocks a brand new ability in his Resurrection Dragra, but Chad just mercilessly shuts him down, killing his opponent with a punch to the gut that even creates a crater in the shape of a skull. With Gantenbane dead, Chad takes a moment to admire his handiwork, glancing up at the skull-shaped imprint in the wall. This is another moment of absolutely peak foreshadowing by Kubo, dropping a 16th level secret that one day Chad's lust for power and immense strength will overcome him, and he'll likely wipe out an entire tower block's worth of innocent civilians just to decorate another wall with his own brand of justice. Chad's motto has always been, since really the start of the series, to use his fists and metaphorically his immeasurable power for good and to win boatloads of cash in boxing tournaments, and so the ends justify the means. When he's ridding Karakura Town of the persistent hollow threat, well, it's not really his fault if a building full of people with the lights on is annihilated. In fact, he swears to this day that the tower block came out of nowhere, thinking that if the Shinigami were able to concoct a fake Karakura Town once, who's to say this isn't fake as well? But with Gantenbane's over 100 lives exhausted and the Privarone Espada dead at Chad's feet, that brings Chad's involvement in the Urankar arc to a definitive close, as he sadly doesn't meet another enemy for the rest of the arc. While Chad likely could have stormed Las Noches himself, as it's impossible to imagine him losing, he decides it's time for a lie down, and quickly falls asleep while the rest of the war plays out around him. And with that we find ourselves at the end of Bleach itself. There are simply no more enemies left to fight. Having exhausted all of his opponents and having not yet reached the level where he's willing to take down an entire tower block worth of innocent civilians, Chad decides to start small and blows a hole in a building, alerting nearby emergency services simply due to the fact that he's frustrated at having no one to fight. Then, in the culmination of the narrative through line that's been building all the way throughout Bleach so far, that we've chronicled in this video today, Chad, mad with power, eventually decides to take another crack at becoming the main character, and launches a frenzied, wild attack on Ichigo, culminating in him picking Ichigo up and launching him into a building in an unprovoked assault, the kind of assault the anime doesn't want you to know about. Unfortunately then, for Ichigo, his proclamation from the Soul Society arc came true. This was the peak foreshadowing I was talking about. Ichigo inadvertently foreshadowed his own death at Chad's hands, because he couldn't imagine him losing, which meant our main character stood absolutely no chance. And so with Ichigo now dead, there's no one left to stand in Chad's way. Alright everyone, but that's it for today's video, a detailed, thorough, in-depth look at Chad's many victories throughout the story of Bleach. Of course, the main narrative through line, really, of the entire series itself. Chad does get a lot of time to shine throughout Bleach, and really, most of the main battles tend to revolve around him. Whether he's fighting Bulbous G, the series' most storied Hollow, the one who defeated Aizen, or of course Tatsufasa Enjoji, someone who made our list of the top 10 most powerful characters in Bleach, it does not matter who Chad faces, because we simply can't imagine him losing. Alright everyone, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. As always, let me know down in the comments which of Chad's many victories was your absolute favourite. I'd love to know your thoughts on how powerful Chad actually is by the end of Bleach. Is he the strongest character, or is there room for somebody else to take that crown? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Could Chad have been handled any differently? Was there really any way to make Chad more impressive than he already was? Could he have had a slightly greater showing somehow in Bleach? I find that hard to believe, but I guess anything's possible. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, consider hitting subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. And, as always, I want to end the video by giving a massive shout out and saying an enormous thank you to all of my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. The support is greatly appreciated. It does mean the absolute world to me, and it makes a massive difference. Alright everyone, once again, thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then. Sado Chad Yasutora is the definitive... Okay. Sado Chad Yasutora is the definitive winner of the Bleach story. From his unending love affair. Sado Chad Yasutora is the definitive winner of the. Okay, let's start again. Sado Chad Yasutora is the definitive winner of the Bleach story. From his unending love affair with the ground, perhaps the series' longest, most stable relationship, to wailing on regular oh, this ain't gonna work. to okay. To wailing on regular unwitting humans for substantial cash prizes at boxing tournaments. Chad has seen and done it all, and there can be no denying that he's come away from the narrative the best of all the main characters.